First bill we're going to call is Bill number 2254. And we have a couple of people to testify on that bill. The first witness we'll call is Richard Ledyard, Hillary Davis, and Barry Schiller. If you come right up to the table here, and we'll start with you, Richard. Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you.
Just make sure the red button is up on the microphone there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'd like to provide testimony on today is in reflection to the bill that is before the Senate for automated school zone speed enforcement. What it entails is camera technology to be utilized in school zones only to enforce speed while the children are present. It's camera technology, as I said. It can be static camera technology, poles in the ground. It can be portable technology. It can be moved from school zone to school zone. What the bill is, would allow municipalities, cities and towns here in the state of Rhode Island to make a decision if they wanted to utilize such technology to enforce speed in their specific school zones, depending on where the school zones are located and what the problems may be related to speed.
The other states have this type of technology in use now?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The state of Maryland uses it widely in a lot of the municipalities in Maryland. Chicago has a school zone safe program. State of Washington has multiple school zone safe programs in the state of Washington. Tennessee utilizes it. And those are the ones that readily come to mind that have a vast network of school zone speed enforcement programs. Again, they're municipal programs.
Senator Lynch, then Senator Lombardi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you're looking for is authorization to then speak with the municipalities. Is that right? Like this, we're not authorizing anybody to do anything other than have the ability to communicate with your company or some like company to decide, municipality by municipality, whether or not this is something they're looking to do.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Senator Lombardi.
It's kind of a chicken-egg situation. I read the recap, and it talks about no cost to community,
yes,
violator funded, but there has to be an upfront cost somehow. How do we institute the initial installation of these devices?
There actually is no upfront cost, and basically how it works is that the company would charge a monthly fee for use of the cameras, and if the violations did not equate to the monthly fee, it would be what we call a revenue neutral program. We would forgive any costs that were not met by the violator.
Are there any other questions or comments for this witness? Thank you. Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. On behalf of the ACLU, I'm here to issue our concerns regarding this legislation. You have our written testimony in front of you, and you've heard it before, so I won't go into too much detail. Our concern with automated traffic enforcement is that what it does is ensure that a person gets a ticket in the mail after the fact, after they've endangered lives, after they've blown through a school zone. It does not ensure that a person will not do it, just that eventually they'll get a ticket for it. We want to make sure that individuals who are speeding in school zones are caught at the time that they are speeding and not a few weeks later. In addition, we are concerned with the profit to private corporations. We believe that it has raised serious concerns with similar programs such as the red light camera program and the school bus camera program. And while we appreciate that there are a number of provisions placed in this bill to try to mitigate those issues, we don't believe that it will do so entirely. With that, we are concerned with this legislation. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? Thank you. Mr. Schiller?
Yeah, thank you, committee. I just want to briefly support this bill. My background is partly from my 25 years on the Transportation Advisory Committee, where we had a Safe Routes to School program where we're trying to encourage students to walk or bike to school so that they would reduce congestion and pollution around the schools. But a lot of parents are afraid to allow their students to do those things, even though it's in our societal interest for having kids walk for health reasons as well as environmental reasons. And this kind of thing, by deterring speeding in school zones, will be a step in the right direction to encourage more kids to walk to school. It'll be a opportunity to deter motorists, and frankly, I know of some sites where I frequently drive where I'm just shocked, even when there's flashing lights. People are speeding down Mount Pleasant Avenue between Chalkstone and Atwells, and also for Senator Archambault in Greenville, when there's, again, a school zone as you're going west out of Greenville, and I'm just shocked at how fast people are going. And you can't expect police to be there every moment when that happens, so you need to have a deterrent beyond the occasional police that catches them. So I support this bill. I hope that the committee will approve it.
Senator Metz.
Yes, I just wanted to share a good friend of my son's, Low Girl Elementary School, with the crossing guard. The driver went right by the crossing guard, hit the little girl, broke her arm. So I don't, even with a crossing guard, I don't know what's going on, but I just wanted to share that with you.
Are there any other questions? Senator Jabbour.
Thank you. I'm interested because that's my district. Where is the speeding between Atwells and Chalkstone? Is that on
If you're on Mount
Academy and Mount Pleasant Ave? Both of those?
Yeah, when you're going down Mount Pleasant southbound is what I've noticed it, and there's flashing 20-mile things at the school just past.
Past the West School?
School. And I'm just amazed at how fast people go in spite of the flashing things.
I'll bring that to the attention of our Public Safety Commissioner. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you. At this time, Senator Jabbour moves to hold for further study, seconded by Senator Lynch. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The bill's held for further study. The next bill we're going to do is Senator Satchel's bill. I did see him come in. Can someone just poke their head out the door and see if Senator Satchel's out there? Okay. The next bill we'll do then is Senator Archibald's bill, bill number 2110. Senator Archibald, if you want to endeavor to explain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill was in last year. Essentially, it would make stopping, standing, or parking a vehicle at any place where official signs prohibit parking subject to an $85 fine. It's one of those regulations that's lacking currently. This is a cleanup bill.
Is there anyone here to speak on the bill, behalf of the bill? With that, Senator Archibald moves passage, seconded by Senator Jabbour. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The bill passes. Senator Satchel, why don't you come forward and we'll do your bill, which is bill number 2256. Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So the bill that you have in front of you would mandate seatbelts on school buses. This is a bill that's sponsored by Representative Nardolillo on the other side. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is endorsing 3-point seatbelts on school buses. This is a fairly recent development. I understand that obviously the first question that's going to come up with this bill is what would the fiscal impact be? This is certainly something that I viewed as a discussion starter. I hope to sit down with stakeholders and see what we can do. I do have just some basic numbers as far as cost differentials for buses. Bluebird bus, the cost differential would be about $3,000 to $4,000 more per bus. But sitting in front of a number of lawyers right now, that's not as much as litigation would cost if there was an accident or somebody tried to come after the bus company or a school department. New England Transit sales for lap belts only, you could be looking at $2,500, depending on the number. As far as with rides transportation coordinator, the state of Rhode Island, there's two.
Boy, you have a question?
Senator, where did you get those rates for attorneys on? You just said it about attorneys' rates. Where did you pick that up?
My head.
In your head.
Yeah.
Do you have are you a pro se attorney?
No. No.
Injury claims
or an insult.
Go ahead.
No, just what I thought was a statement of fact. I'm sorry. So with RIDE, it's about 219 buses for their statewide program. Providence has 200 buses that are used for the city school transportation. Some of the newer buses do have integrated car seats in the first two rows. There are many of the minibuses for special ed that do have the 3-point seatbelt system. Coventry, where Rep. Nardolillo represents, they have 40 buses used for transportation. So it could be a significant cost, but when you look at student safety and you look at the fact that there are seatbelts in every other kind of vehicle, from passenger cars, airplanes, a lot of trains have seatbelts. So I just think it's something that we should look into. I think it's something that we can work on in the future, and just was hoping for your consideration.
Senator Raptakis, then Senator Archibald.
Senator Satchel, I want to commend you on this initiative because if you look at the cost, it's $3,000 per bus. There's about 60 students on a bus, so you're talking $50 per pupil. And the other issue is I don't think that any school bus company would buy a fleet of buses. Wouldn't they integrate the buses, maybe buy 10 per year? Usually when they buy new buses, they're not going to buy 40 or 200. You said 219 for, I think it was RIDE. But usually they'll probably buy maybe 10 at a time or maybe 10 per year, so the cost won't be that significant. But I think putting the bill in for a starting point is, I think, a pretty good idea for safety of these young children. You're talking about kindergarten kids up to high school kids, and especially when an accident does occur, you can save a life or prevent bodily harm or bodily injury. But again, it's $50 a student. You're talking 60 students per bus, $3,000. So.
And that's if the district buys their own buses. Many districts contract with providers.
Correct.
So that the cost may not be as significant as $3,000 to $4,000 when you're looking at the overall contract, because they're not going to be buying the individual buses. It could be worked into their contract where they're going to pay a one-time fee because they are going to get these updated buses that they're going to be having a contract for.
Any neighborhood states in the vicinity, Northeast U.S. or even East Coast, that has some type of seat belts on their buses? Are there any states close by to us?
Not close by. Right now, California, Florida, Louisiana, New Jersey, New York, and Texas. So New Jersey and New York would be the closest.
Thank you.
Senator Archibald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I want to commend you for putting this bill in. I think it defies logic that we would have school buses without seat belts on them. And I couldn't imagine someone testifying in opposition to this bill. I understand it all comes down to money. I remember my undergrad, I had a course in regulation, federal regulation in D.C. It talked about risk and culture and about how lives are associated with almost every regulation that you can think of. It's a trade-off for human lives. How many people are going to die? And then, there's a money or a cost, concomitant fee associated or a cost associated with that. So here, how can you put a price on the life of a child? We should have seat belts in buses, and this is one of those proactive bills that I'm proud of you for putting in, and I think it's a great bill, and thanks for being proactive.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Lombardi.
Adam, Senator, I want to also echo Senator Archibald and Senator Raptakis' sentiment, and I want to thank you for allowing me to co-sponsor this in a life just before this life. I was on a school committee, and it's funny how you see things come full circle. And the question always was raised in my mind: why aren't seat belts on buses? And at the time, there was, I think, sentiment out there that somehow it endangered the lives of children. And it boggles my mind that it's taken us another generation of children to realize that this is actually something that we should be doing. And I agree with you. And it's something going through the budgetary process as we phase this in. I'm sure that school districts will be able to, while there is a fiscal impact, I think there's an ability to factor this in, and saving lives is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Are there any other questions or comments? Senator G.
Senator, I think this is an interesting proposal. I guess my concern would be the financial impact. If some parents or some other people came along and said, well, if you're going to install seatbelts, why not do what the automobile industry did 15 or 20 years ago, and that is put in these airbags, which are much safer than just wearing the seatbelt alone. Are there any school districts, any users that have actually looked at doing airbag restraints in addition to wearing the seatbelts?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can only imagine, again, I could be wrong, as I was with my comment about the lawyer fees, but I would imagine that the airbags would be significantly more expensive than a 3-point harness. So I don't know if that's a possibility. I haven't looked into it. I can certainly look into it, and I can have somebody get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Are there any other questions or comments? With that, Senator Jabbour moves to hold for further study, seconded by Senator Lynch. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The bill's held for further study. The next two bills we're going to do are Bill number 2232 and 2255. One is by Senator Chacon, and the other is by Senator Cisnowski, and they deal with the use of mobile phones. We do have a number of people signed up to testify in the bill. The first witness we'll call is Captain John Allen of the Rhode Island State Police, Joey Ledbecker, the Department of the Attorney General, and Margaret Sweeney. Barry Schiller. And we'll start with you, Captain, if you can speak on both bills at this time.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm here on behalf of Colonel O'Donnell to voice the Rhode Island State Police's support of Senate Bills S-2232 and 2255, entitled Mobile Telephone Use, which would prohibit any person in the operation of a motor vehicle from using a handheld mobile telephone to engage in calling or texting when such vehicle is in motion. Using a cell phone or other electronic device while driving is unsafe and makes accidents more likely. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, in 2013, 3,154 people were killed nationally in motor vehicle crashes involving distracted drivers. Another 424,000 were injured. 10% of drivers of all ages under the age of 20 involved in fatal crashes were reported as distracted at the time of the crash. Drivers in their 20s make up 27% of the distracted drivers in fatal crashes. At any given daylight moment across America, 660,000 drivers are using cell phones or manipulating electronic devices while driving, a number that has held steady since 2010. 5 seconds is the average time your eyes are off the road while texting. When traveling at 55 miles per hour, that's enough time to cover the length of a football field blindfolded. A quarter of teens respond to a text message once or more every time they drive. 20% of all teens and 10% of parents admit that they have had extended multi-message text conversations while driving. Texting while driving has become a dangerous epidemic in our state, and I'm sure that we've all witnessed a person operating erratically as a result. Under the current law, it is often difficult for law enforcement to prove that someone is texting while operating a motor vehicle without seizing said mobile telephone for evidence. If there are no witnesses to texting and driving, law enforcement must obtain a search warrant to search the mobile telephone. Law enforcement would then be required to testify in court that the text messages sent hinder driving. To date, 14 other states have passed legislation banning the use of a handheld mobile telephone while driving, to include Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Vermont. A similar bill is pending in Massachusetts. By passing legislation that would prohibit the use of a mobile telephone while driving, the public will have less of an opportunity to text while operating a vehicle. Reducing the distractions for the operator of a motor vehicle results in safer roadways for the citizens of Rhode Island. Thank you for your time.
Are there any questions or comments for the captain? Senator Lombardi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Captain, every time this bill or these bills come up before us, I'm reminded of Attorney General Kilmartin's project, It Can Wait, that was brought to us at Cranston West back when I was on the school committee. And I've never forgotten that formula of if someone looks down while traveling 55 miles an hour to respond to a text, they would have traveled 100 yards in their vehicle blindfolded. And I think that's so telling. And that piece, that film, that documentary that they put on is so telling. It shows all of these horrific accidents in the name of superficial texting. I'll be home in a minute. Yes, no, that kind of stuff. I use the phrase often in the last 4 years, no-brainer. This one's a no-brainer.
Are there any other questions or comments? Senator G.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You use to determine whether or not an electronic device has been a contributing factor to an accident. And I heard you say you've got to get a search warrant if it's not readily visible. Expound on that, if you would, just to...
Senator, the way the law is written now, if I issue you a summons for texting while driving, and you appeal that summons and we respond to traffic court, I have to testify that I saw you manipulating a device longer than it would take to dial a 10-digit phone number, and that, by you manipulating that device, it affected how you were driving. It still allows you to hold the device in your hand. The current law allows you to hold the device in your hand for as long as it takes to dial a phone. If you're dialing a 10-digit phone number, the law still permits that. This law prohibits that. You're not allowed to hold the phone at all.
Are there any other questions or comments for this witness? Thank you. Joey, you can proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. And it's a pleasure to be in front of the committee tonight. I don't think I've been here all year yet, so it's good to see everyone. The Attorney General does support both of these pieces of legislation. As Senator Lombardi pointed out, since the beginning of his administration, we have been doing the It Can Wait program. And it's asked high schoolers across our state to sign a pledge that texting can wait. Unfortunately, everyone's texting, and everyone's using their cell phones, and we think this is the biggest traffic safety issue our state's facing, and we think that this bill solves it. We know that some studies show that texting and driving is more dangerous than actually drinking and driving or drug driving. So we know this is a very simple way to help protect everyone on our roads. And I would be remiss to point this out, but when the Attorney General was a representative in 2001, he actually was the sponsor of the legislation that was vetoed by Governor Almond. That was 15 years ago. I think it's now time for us to pass this bill.
Are there any questions or comments for this witness? Thank you. Mr. Schiller?
Priority bills because however, there are two bills, and a version passed, I believe, unanimously in the Senate last year. On the House, we never got it to a vote, but I will report that in the House hearing on a similar bill, in addition to my table mates, we got support from representatives of the local police, the American Automobile Association, Coalition for Transportation Choices, and the Richter Riders Alliance. Again, those last two groups were concerned with pedestrian safety and the societal interest. However, with two bills, I do want to comment about merging them or melding them going forward, because I believe there will be a lot of support in the Senate. For example, I kind of like 2255, Senator Sosnowski's bill, and a couple of features. For one thing, it delays the act taking effect for about a year so people could get the equipment to have hands-free devices. I think it's only fair to give people some time to get to find another technology that is going to be legal. Secondly, I think the penalties in Senator Sosnowski's bills are more reasonable. There is a $100 fine, but it's waived for the first offense if the person gets a hands-free device, and it doesn't go above 100 afterward, which I think is reasonable. The fines in the other bill by Senator Chacon, I think, reach the point where they're so high. It seems to me that a policeman sympathizing even with someone violating it will be reluctant to do any citation if the fines get too high. So my advice is use the fines from Senator Sosnowski's bill. One last point is one thing that might be better in Senator Chacon's bill is that it seems to me that it expands the definition of handheld device to more than what we think of as a cell phone, perhaps a personal computer even. So take a look at the language, which I think might be of Senator Chacon's bill. I hope that you do move some version of these bills forward, and we'll really work hard to get it past the House also.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this witness? Thank you. The next witness we have is Gabrielle Abadi from DOT.
Good afternoon. Yes, my name is Gabrielle Abadi, and I'm the Chief of Highway Safety in the Department of Transportation, and I'm speaking in complete support of both of these bills. You've already heard the basic statistics, the data. You've heard who supports it, why they support it. DOT is no different. It's a proven thing that we would have hands-free as another layer of protection for all drivers, all bicyclists, all pedestrians. And that's what my office supports. I, too, am also part of the It Can Wait program as DOT, and actually in MAD I used to talk on this. And I, too, looked at all of the data, but those true anecdotal stories, the honest story and the trauma of families and communities is certainly something that will move it. But when you get that backed up with, data and numbers, and that is kind of a weakness of distracted driving. We don't have a lot of local numbers at this point, and one of the reasons we don't is because it's so difficult for law enforcement to police distracted driving. Without going into the whole search warrant and getting the data and things like that. But I live in Burrillville, so as a personal thing, a couple of years ago, we had a young 19-year-old that had a 17-year-old friend in the back seat. And all she did was she had her cell phone on the side of her, and because of her distraction when the phone rang, she killed herself and her friend in the back seat right on Route 102. So it's not just young people. We all know adults and stuff. It goes across the board. I'm impressed that Massachusetts just passed it in their Senate committee. And their bill actually really looks very much like Connecticut's bill, which actually both look a lot like Senator Chacon's bill. We're not taking a preference at this point. Senator Sosnowski's name is on both. That's good for us. And her bill is the complement of the one in the House side. But the difference is the increments of penalties. And although that might, like Barry said, Mr. Stiller said, that it might deter law enforcement, on the other hand, I've been spending the day trying to find out if in distracted driving, specifically for hands-free devices, do bills that have incremental penalties have a direct impact on, lessening the behavior? Do they serve as a deterrent in this particular case? Because in drunk driving, they certainly did, and that's what I talked about for many years. I haven't been able to find that data that would prove that, either in Connecticut or any of the states that have it, but I'm looking for it, if in fact that's the one thing that you really want to tweak on either one of these. And I can't, this is my first time in front of this committee this year as well, and I don't want to leave anybody without telling you, this is the first time in 2015 that Rhode Island saw fatalities go under 50. Not that we went to 45. We went from like four or five straight years in the 60s, 60 families, 60 people, 60, it's amazing. And then last year in 2014, we were at 51. And 2015 saw it decrease to 45. That's not good, because every number in my mind always represents a person and a family. But we're on the right trend. And one of the trends that we do see is that is consistent and has been consistent is impaired driving. And impaired driving still represents a third of all of our fatalities in the state, consistently still. So we have genuine concern in my office and in DOT in general. We're not going to be able to create, safe roads for somebody's behavior that we have to really treat differently in many cases. But when you add the distracted driving, impaired drivers have phones and they get distracted as well. So to Joey's point about, it's just as consistently dangerous, that may so, but can you imagine combining them? So if we can remove that other one behavior, I think it'd be another layer of protection. So that's my testimony tonight. Fully in support.
Are there any questions or comments for this witness? Senator G.
Gabriel.
Yes.
What is an impaired? I'm not an attorney, so help me with that.
Impaired is anything that actually, it can be at a .03. It depends. It's a personal type of thing. So if I have one glass, I'm talking about alcohol. Are you talking about alcohol impairment?
Yep. You just answered my question.
Yeah, for me, I would be impaired at a very low thing. It's anything that changes your brain activity, changes your reflexes specifically, that inhibits what you need to drive a vehicle. And in many cases, I've seen some people that it doesn't take a lot at all, and vice versa. Some others. So our legal limit is set at .08 because medically speaking, that is when everybody, if they reach that level, no matter how long it takes to get there, is too inhibited, too impaired to drive a vehicle.
Okay, and seeing the abuse of a cell phone or some electronic device
yes.
Makes me crazy when I'm in the car driving around because I see kids at a traffic light, talking about whatever it is, and the light can be green for 15 or 20 seconds before somebody honks a horn or
I know.
And it gets back once more to my question. Are the statutes governing finding evidence in the car? So, suppose I'm a traffic officer and I stop somebody that I think I saw using a cell phone. My question then is, can I ask them? I know that this is not your department.
It isn't my department, and you have lawyers up there, and I know that Kevin is. But I assume, I know that if I were in a car and somebody asked me, I would readily say yes, but I don't know. I don't know if you say no if you get into trouble, unless it had an impact, unless you caused a crash, unless there was another infraction. But I don't have but I do know that officers are having difficulty. One of the things that our office does do is that we have NHTSA funds that pay and support special details. So impaired driving details, speeding details. We actually have funds that support distracted driving detail, and that's one of the least favored detail out there because it's so difficult to monitor. Because everything's low in the car, and people are really good at it.
But and the captain said that the problem they have, of course, is winding up in court trying to prosecute this thing when the defenses are
That's right.
are multiple. So then my question is, do we need to a change in the statute that allows us an easier way to make sure that we maximize the return on investment when we stop someone for?
I think this is a beginning. I really do think that the attention to this is, I think the other part of that, Senator, quite frankly, is always exactly what we're talking about the Attorney General. It's that educational component. We just can't put all of our safety in the hands of law enforcement officers and expect them to regulate that type of behavior. I think and I do appreciate the fact that you said you see young, people in the cars, but I don't know. I don't, when I drive to work in the morning, I see a lot of people like my age, older, and just a little bit younger, and they're still on their thing. So, when we talk to young people, we specifically say, put it in your glove compartment, turn it completely off, keep it in your handbag. We're looking at those ways, but I think it's a combination, just like drunk driving wasn't just policy driven. We've done so great with policy in that, and we've made inroads, but a lot of that also had to do with law enforcement and education and stuff. So it's,
And we do that. The kids going into the police going into community forums and going into the school, they do a great job. And the video that has been produced showing the dangers and using actual footage of the damage after an accident's happened it's
social media
devastating.
Does a great job.
And it certainly the kids that I've witnessed taking these classes or taking part in the presentations have been silent
Yeah.
when it ends.
Yep, I know.
And it's very, very effective.
The most recent one I went to was at Mount Pleasant High School, and man, it was really loud in that auditorium. I mean, it was like clamoring when I get in. I said, oh my God, how do they do it so early in the morning, these teachers? And the minute they saw the video and heard, A.G. Kilmartin, it was like quiet, quiet. And they see these types of things all the time, and they still respect the fact that that's a person up there, and that person could be me or my mom and stuff. So, yeah, you're right about that. People understand it. They just sometimes forgetful. So sometimes that's what good statute and policy does, reminds us all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Raptakis.
Quick question
Hello,
for you.
Senator
How are you?
Raptakis. How are you?
Good. Have you had any data say voluntarily data to know how many people were texting or on their cell phones? Because every morning when you hear on WPRO, this crash, that crash,
Yeah.
you're thinking how many of these individuals were driving either texting or on their cell phone. Do you have any data as long as maybe somebody said, oh, no, I was texting or I was on my cell phone at all?
It's really not. It's not that measured. Not right now. It isn't. It's not. I mean, I can tell you that Colonel Lynch from Barville, who handled that crash, would come in front of you, and I mean, actually, he wants to increase the bill to a heavier degree, but. There's very few. We can get crashes and we do all the fatality crashes. We can do them on speed because of reconstruction. We can do them on impairment because of toxology. But the rub of that is a little bit more difficult. You're right. So unless somebody actually comes forward and admits it, or they can get it in a court case, and it would have to be directly impact a serious injury or fatality. Right now, no, I would, but that's not to say we won't have it. And that's, I think, our biggest thing. This is really a good prevention. This is a really good prevention thing. If you want to take hold of, and, it's kind of sad that we did this 15 years ago and we're back here again, but it's a really true, that layer. Okay, we recognize this is an oncoming problem.
Yeah, it's something that we got to get
That's right.
serious and
That's right.
try to pass.
And other
this
states
bill.
have done it, so we have some, data, national data for that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I got a quick question. One bill says effective upon passage, and the other one says June 1st, 2017. I don't know why. What's the date, June 1st, 2017?
You'd have to ask the sponsors that, Senator.
I'm surprised because one is effective upon passage. I like to see this pass as soon as we can, maybe toward the end of the year, and try to send a strong message out there.
Are there any other questions or comments? Senator Lombardi.
Just a comment on what you said. The trend, I think, is in favor of statistical data.
Yes,
and I
absolutely.
see that the use of cell phones and texting has become prominent, even at the risk of sounding Senator Archibald-like.
And that's a bad thing?
In the civil practice now, even in the clearest of auto accidents on the personal injury side.
Yes.
Rear ender, red light, whatever.
Yep.
Question invariably is asked of our clients, the plaintiffs, were you on the cell phone at the time of the accident? And insurance companies are now using that as a defense, even in the clearest of cases. So I think, and I use that by illustration, I think
Yes.
the trend is currently moving towards developing data to acquire,
Yes.
use of the cell phone and texting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you heard some from the captain. I mean, that's national data, so we use that what we have. But yeah, but your point made about insurance companies getting it, that's interesting. That's great. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for this witness? Does anyone else wish to speak on these bills? Having that, Senator Dubois moves to hold both bills for further study. Seconded by Senator Lynch. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The bills are held for further study. The next bill we're going to do is Senator O'Neill's Bill 2067. Senator O'Neill, why don't you come forward? Senator Connolly asked to be recorded in the affirmative on the previous bills. He was at another committee. Without objection, so ordered. You can proceed, Senator O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate you hearing this bill, particularly early in the session. As you may recall, this is often referred to as the Terry Hassett bill. This is a bill we named in a recognition of what happened to Terry up here on Atwells Avenue. He was run down, left in the street to die, and it's representative of many of the other people who have been hit by drivers who have left them to either bleed out or die or with serious injuries. So essentially what this bill does is it increases penalties for leaving the scene of an accident with injury or serious injury resulting. With respect to the committee, I did not bring in a host of witnesses again because you've heard this bill. You've passed it 3 times, so I didn't think it would be appropriate to tie up your time having the same people come in and testify again. Joey is here from the Attorney General's office. As you may recall, we also had testimony last year from AAA, from MAD, and from other groups, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions for Senator O'Neill? Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
The first group of witnesses we'll call are Eric Kramer, Joey Ledbeck, and Hillary Davis. And we'll start with you, Joey.
Chairman, thank you. As Senator O'Neill said, you've heard our testimony on this bill for several years now, but we are in full support of the bill. There's 2 marked things about defendants that are charged with leaving the scene of an accident, whether it's physical injury, serious bodily injury, or death. They failed to render aid to the person that was their victim and left them on the road. And most of the time, they're probably evading higher charges of drunk driving or drug driving. So we think there's an additional level of culpability there, and we think that this bill meets that well. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments for this witness? Thank you. You can proceed.
I'd like to echo Ms. Lindbeck's sentiments on this bill. I think that it's warranted here in Rhode Island, and I think it sends a strong message out there. And I'd like to see Rhode Island continue to go in the direction of being a leader within the Northeast in regards to our stance against individuals not taking responsibility for their actions. And I think this is a bill that should be passed, and I think it's a long time in the making. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? Senator Archibald.
Just a quick comment. Nice to see you here, Mr. Creamer. Mr. Creamer is the new director for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. For those of you who don't know, he took over after Gabrielle Abadi, who just testified so artfully, went on to the DOT. So it's great to see you here. I've had the pleasure of working with Mr. Creamer on some legislation to enhance DUI penalties and to streamline some DUI bills. And it's nice to see you passionate about this bill as well. So welcome to the committee. It's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, Senator.
Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you. Ms. Davis, you can proceed.
Thank you again, Chairman and members of the committee. The ACLU is here in opposition to this legislation. As the committee knows, anytime we talk about raising penalties, we feel it's very important that those penalties are raised in a demonstrable way, or in a way that is demonstrable to the impact, or that will be demonstrated to prevent this sort of issue happening in the future, that the penalty is in effect measurable to the crime, and that it will keep the person from doing it again in the future. While we certainly appreciate what this bill is trying to do and understand the feeling of need to increase these penalties and to penalize these individuals, we feel that doubling and tripling these penalties isn't necessarily in line with what evidence would indicate is best. In addition, I do want to bring the committee's attention to one particular line. It's on page 2, it's line 7. It talks about reinstating driving privileges, and it talks about how you can't have your driving privileges reinstated until all liens and judgments are satisfied. We believe that probably is meant to refer solely to liens and judgments relating to this issue, but as we read it, the individual would have to have all liens and judgments relating to anything satisfied, and we just think that that's a little too broad. So with that, I thank you very much for your time.
Are there any other questions or comments for this witness? Thank you. Hillary, if you can get Senator O'Neill some language to address that issue about liens and judgments. With that, Senator Jabbour moves to hold for further study, seconded by Senator Lynch. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The bill is held for further study. The next bill we'll do is Senator Doyle's bill, Bill 2252. It's a bill that would set new weight restrictions on vehicles on the 10 Mile River Bridge in Pawtucket. We do have a letter from Mr. Martesian on behalf of the Rhode Island Lumber and Builders opposed to the bill. Senator, no one's here to testify on behalf of the bill.
Does that bridge get a gantry?
There's no one here to testify on behalf of the bill. Senator Jabour moves to hold for further study, seconded by Senator Lynch. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The bill's held for further study. The next bill we have is Senator Metz's bill, bill number 2253. Senator Metz, if you want to endeavor to explain.
Yes, I believe we passed this last year, and it died over because of the session ended early. And you remember the mother and the handicapped daughter in the wheelchair that came up, Bernadine Clay Smith, and her daughter in the wheelchair, and the bus driver and the aide not knowing how to properly strap the young lady in the wheelchair, so she has bruises and scrapes on her neck because they didn't have the seat belt or the wheelchair belt in the proper place. And all she asked was that the drivers be trained so that the kids in the wheelchairs wouldn't be flopping all over the place. And we passed it last year, and she's been up here for years trying to get this passed, and I'd appreciate it if we could pass it again.
Is anyone present to testify? There's no one present to testify. Are there any questions of Senator Metz? Hearing none. Senator G.
Senator Metz, is this a practice that's done in other communities?
I'm not certain, Senator. They have training, but this one is more specific to using the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, using their program. So it's more specific to that. But everybody has training of their aides and people on the school buses, but they're missing certain parts of this Highway Traffic Safety Administration, their procedures.
Thank you.
With that, Senator Metz moves passage, seconded by Senator Jabour. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the bill passes. Senator Conley moves that we adjourn, seconded by Senator G. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, we're adjourned for the evening.